What we're going to talk about today over the next 20 or 30 minutes is the Yukon as an emerging Tier 1 mining jurisdiction and why. So we'll hit on some of the topics, including the permissive geology, and Jay alluded to the endowment in the Yukon. It is a top 10 in the world jurisdiction for mineral potential. The investment climate for juniors, the innovation related to infrastructure initiatives, First Nations relationships, the strategic positioning of the Yukon in the current market. So I'm going to start with you, Mr. Premier. In my experience, I haven't seen a jurisdiction market as uniquely as the Yukon has. As an analyst, having covered companies for 20 years, you've made it an effort to market the Yukon at retail and institutional conferences. With significant discoveries like Snowline Gold and companies that have been in the background doing some very significant things, including joint ventures like Rio Tinto with Western Copper and Gold on the casino project. How is the Yukon government working to continue the momentum and advance the territory as being an attractive destination for capital? And I'll point out that since the marketing maybe 5 to 8 years ago, exploration expenditures are up. It's attracted a lot of capital, and there are senior mining companies in the Yukon that weren't there 10 years ago. There's now 8 in various forms and fashions.
Well, thank you, first of all, for giving me an opportunity to tell the Yukon story. I think that, and to be here with Scott and yourself, a real honor. But I would think that the Yukon government, the model has been that we work with Yukon Mining Alliance, which is helping us. So we have an organization that works directly with the private sector, represents the companies that are working in the Yukon, but also is constantly looking for new opportunities, whether it's bringing dollars in from the capital markets or it is ensuring that new companies have representation on a global stage. So the team that we put together is ensuring that the government officials, along with the Yukon Mining Alliance and the companies, can work collectively with a shared strategy, really, to hit the places you want to be in the world to tell your story. We've seen other jurisdictions like British Columbia now try to emulate that. Ontario, different U.S. states. So we think that that's the best form of validation, really, for us, is that we now see people understanding how effective that can be. So the model has always been that the ministers and the premier, through successive governments, that's the stability and commitment from the Yukon to make sure that we're out there supporting it, because it's just such an incredible part of our community, our economy, and it's so incredibly important for the future of the Yukon economy and what's going to happen in the Yukon.
Okay, great. Scott, let's talk about your major gold discovery in the Yukon of global significance. We certainly cover Snowline. Full disclosure, our research is for information purposes only and not for recommendations. But you've got 7 million ounces and growing. Share price has gone from 45 cents, so I think today is about 5.30. You've essentially become an ambassador for the Yukon on some fronts with all the global marketing you've done. Institutionally and with retail, you've got a lot of recognition with awards, international awards. How big an opportunity has this been for you to kind of showcase, having been born and bred in the Yukon is an attractive jurisdiction?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, obviously it's been a huge opportunity. I've been prospecting in the Yukon since I was very young and working on some of these same projects for just as long. And so to get to where we've gotten and to really show that potential that we've pounded the table about for years, for decades, is real. That's pretty big. And so just to be able to, there's a lot of talk about the endowment of the Yukon and the potential that's there in the rocks, but to be able to go out there, especially with my father as small-scale prospectors, and to go and show that that's not just talk, that's real, to go and stake some claims, ultimately leading to that discovery where the mineralization is just sticking out of the ground. It's just a strong emphasis on what you're saying there about the mineral endowment of the territory, and that there are a lot of low-hanging fruit left to be found by just going out there and hopefully exploring responsibly and looking around. And so, yeah, it's an opportunity that we've worked very hard for, and we've had a big team of very good people come together around Snowline and even advancing the project prior to Snowline. Yeah, we're certainly not looking to waste this opportunity.
Yeah, it impressed me that really part of the discovery was leveraging the Yukon geoscience data set in terms of the stream geochem and stuff like that for you to be able to hone in. Let's talk about critical minerals, Mr. Premier. Yukon is home to a number of emerging leaders, and one example would be Fireweed Metals that has recently secured just over $35 million in funding from the federal government and also down south from the Department of Defense. How's the Yukon government kind of embracing that opportunity in terms of critical minerals projects, and what role do you see yourself playing in Canada's critical minerals strategy?
Yeah, look, we've always been looking at these opportunities. I think there's a history of critical minerals before it became, topical in the themes of the day. And so we knew, and there's historically you've seen critical minerals focused on in the Yukon. Yeah, I think out of, the numbers switch all the time from 31, I think it's 34 now, and we're at 27 of the critical minerals that we know you can find in the Yukon. We've got, of course, this fireweed story is becoming pretty exciting. It's not just, it's about innovation and technology, but it's also about defense. It kind of covers all facets of the use of that, and it's probably enough for the U.S. In a partnership, in a proper relationship, with significant First Nation involvement to have a supply for 50 years to the U.S. I mean, this is significant. Look, our role as a Yukon government, I think number one is, I've shared with some folks over the next number of days, we have diplomats at our door every month asking how they can play a role. So trying to, help match that up, whether it's draw in dollars from their capital markets, make sure if they have miners in their jurisdiction and it's a friendly jurisdiction that we can see some joint venture or opportunities, and then the things that we have to do to make sure that we set the table appropriately to be able to feed into that opportunity. It's as we look at what's going to happen today. So as everybody watches on your phone, probably while you're here to see what's going to play out, this is a incredibly important topic. I've spent some time with the transition team folks that are going in today in Washington, and critical minerals, as you know, has been front and center. So we have an opportunity, I think, in this country. I'll just say that we can identify opportunities, we can build mines, and really, how do we make sure that we build a complete supply chain within North America? And that's, probably looking at the US and leaning on them. So we also have an opportunity to build the industrial base for smelting. How do we refine? How do we not always just take something and ship it if we don't have that extra refinery capacity or smelter capacity in British Columbia, Ontario, Quebec, or wherever it may be? It's an incredible opportunity. We do have to seize it right now. But I think that everybody's starting to speak the right language. Politicians are kind of across the country are getting their head around it, and I think we're in a really good spot as a country. But we have to make it work right now.
Okay, no, thanks for that. And maybe staying with you on infrastructure, Mr. Premier, and on critical minerals, the casino project is Canada's biggest critical minerals project, right in the Yukon. And infrastructure is often a key challenge cited by analysts and others, especially in remote areas. How's the Yukon government addressing infrastructure? What steps are being taken to support the advancement of projects across the spectrum, from the existing mines, development projects, and then to greenfield discoveries like Scott's?
Look, there's a lot of key elements, of course, to infrastructure you have to focus on. When you think about Western Copper and the casino project, first of all, there's nowhere in the world that you're going to walk into a room to talk mining and represent the Yukon that somebody's not going to say, we want to know about the casino project. That's a global, it's a global interest. Of course, we've had Mitsubishi and Rio Tinto partnering up in that project. So the conversation that always starts with, some of the key things: ports, power, people. That's key. For us, there's a number of things we're doing. you're always going to invest in roads and some of the infrastructure, the hard infrastructure, and that's, we have a big package that we're rolling out in different areas off the Yukon as we see where people are in their projects and how we can support that. The second one would be in a modern day context of mining. As we see AI move into it, you have to have the capacity and bandwidth. So we've just finished building an 800 kilometer fiber line. Many Canadians would know that Canada did not have redundancy across all 3 territories. That gives us that opportunity. Really significant project. 1,100 water crossings. Like it was a big one, and it got built in partner with First Nation governments. We're in engagement in Skagway and with Alaska, state of Alaska, as well as the private sector, on looking at what the solution will be for tidewater. We're barging out now. There was old infrastructure that has to be replaced, so it's again looking to invest to make sure that everything can get to tidewater.
This is for the concentrates getting out.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, of course, we can cut down time even from folks shipping out of Vancouver. And I mean, I guess the other piece would be, look, we're modernizing our airport. We're spending about $250 million right now. With our population base, that's really significant to see that level, and that's something that people want to know. Plus, we have other strips and other airports throughout the Yukon. And lastly, although we have an obligation in the short term to invest in our electrical grid and to be able to support projects, we also have to think generationally. So we've leveraged $40 million from Canada, and we're looking at the potential of building a grid connection between British Columbia and the Yukon. Not so much just to buy power from BC, but make sure that we can have access to purchase power from the North American grid, to be part of that opportunity, so you can scale up on your power needs quickly without just having to spend all the CapEx on projects that may be needed or may not, but being able to turn it on and off in the long term.
Yeah, no, that would be nation building. Especially if First Nations are able to feed, Runner River connects all the way through to the Yukon. Back to Scott. To underscore your valley discovery in the Yukon, just how impactful it could be is Agentis models, 500,000 ounces per year production profile. I know you don't have an economic study out, but that's over 20 years. There's only 10 mines in the world producing at that scale. So this is really in the gun sights and of global significance. Just to emphasize that point, it'll throw off in our model again, and other analyst models I'm sure have this, $280 million per year in free cash flow, $2.1 billion in taxes to the government. So it will be very profound in terms of its impact on the Yukon economy if it comes into fruition, which I think it will. What steps does Snowline want to be taking to ensure the future of this potential mine is developed with really positive socioeconomic features and attributes, alignment with First Nations, and environmental responsibility?
Yeah, I think that the Yukon needs a mine like that. We have world-class geology, as we've talked about, and we need a mine that can really stand on its own feet and compete at the world scale, because we have the rocks to do it. And so, I think Valley is a strong candidate for that, for the reasons you mentioned, or that kind of scale in general. And so it's a robust asset, and I think it has the legs to move forward responsibly. And so as a company, we've recognized that from an early stage. And it has been part of our philosophy even before finding Valley, just to be looking for this kind of a system. But also to be setting the ball rolling in the right way. I'm born and raised in the Yukon, raising a family in the Yukon. It's important to me that we get this right. And so right after the discovery holes at Valley, we started on baseline environmental studies, and we're ramping those up this year to really make sure that we are covering the bases there and understanding the context in which this deposit sits. It's been a part of our strategy and just approach and philosophy in general from an early stage to engage in the Yukon, to reach out to First Nations, sitting down even before launching the company with various First Nations and talking about what our plans were and what mutual plans might look like and how we might be able to move things forward together. So And a lot of good has come out of those talks. I mean, they're still early stage, but I was very proud that we were able to work with the Development Corporation of the First Nation of Notchinaga-Dun, who lease us our solar panels and which power a majority of our main camp. That was just, that's a one-off, and it's not an indication of, positive decision or so on from the First Nation by any stretch, but it's just a step in the right direction and kind of the philosophy that we're taking, and I think that those conversations are very important. So continuing in that vein, continuing to set a high bar for our environmental work, and hopefully bringing a mine online that can pull more than its own weight, leave things better than we found them, essentially fully reclaimed and with a much better understanding of the environment in that part of the world after the life of the project.
You've been to site, Premier. Did you want to add anything on Valley in particular?
Yeah, early stage, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's good when you get to site and the first thing you do is one of their team walks over, you pick a rock up. They didn't pick the rock up, I picked the rock that I wanted to, and you break it and there's visible gold. I guess that's probably a good sign. And I think I picked the rock up. You didn't, nobody told me to pick that rock up.
It took us months to scatter all those around.
Yeah. Maybe it was every rock that was there, but anyway, it worked. It's a pretty exceptional opportunity.
Yeah, it's a unicorn. It's the best discovery I've seen in 20 years, and I've published that view. Scott will be speaking in a number of venues, so we won't continue on that vein, pun intended. Let's talk about First Nations, Indigenous relationships, partnerships. Mr. Premier, Scott's already touched on his relationship and approach with the Notchinaga-Dun, but the mining industry has a long history of collaboration at various levels with the First Nations. What step is your government taking in particular to enhance and foster stronger partnerships between the mining companies, Indigenous communities, to really ensure meaningful participation, economic benefits, and environmental stewardship?
Well, there's a tremendous amount that's been happening and continuing to happen. First of all, look, I want to commend Scott. I think the engagement and as a Yukoner going out and spending time with the First Nations that have the traditional territory where he's working and working with their development corporations. For many people last night, there was an event that was hosted by the Yukon Council of First Nations and the First Nations Chamber of Commerce. It's always a packed event. There's been so many joint ventures, opportunities for people to come together. It's really, arguably helped us have the strongest economy in the country over the last 8 years. When you look at, we have the highest percentage of population part of the workforce in the country. We have the lowest unemployment. That's been, something we've seen. We've had strong GDP numbers. All of that has played out, and it's really because of the joint ventures and the opportunities for First Nation governments to play leadership roles. There's a lot of pieces that were going on. I won't get into the entire history of modern treaty in the Yukon, but there is a contract, I'll say, an obligation between the government of Yukon and Yukon First Nation governments to define a number of areas of legislation, regulatory. Some of that work is long overdue, and we're working on that right now, and that's hand in hand. And First Nations are at the table with us, and the co-architecture is off that work. So I think that's incredibly important. And what we're going to see in the next couple of months, I hope we're close to seeing it, is a leadership role from First Nation governments in the mining sphere, probably in critical minerals, where we're going to see the potential for some of the first mining operations potentially owned by First Nation governments, which we haven't seen. We've seen, royalty streams, we've seen investment, but we haven't seen, the ownership piece. And so there's a lot of interest, and so that's a whole other leadership role where First Nation governments are going, no, we want to be at the table helping to own these projects and define our self-determination. So there's an incredible amount of work. Always, it's government to government, and that always leads to lots of time and energy to get it right. But I also think, as you stated, with the development corporations and others, where they don't have to deal with the politics, It's just about building good relationships and creating opportunities for communities. There's really a great track record there.
Yeah, I was impressed at the Yukon Geoscience Forum in November. Some of that momentum on the First Nations side of things, certainly, as you allude to, ownership, project equity, Selkirk Nation, buying the Minto Mine being one. I don't know if you want to touch on that, and other Tronjak with the endorsement of the coffee project in terms of wanting a heap leach mine. I don't know if you want to touch on those a little bit right now, just to.
Yeah, I mean, I want to be. Look, we want to be. I want to be very careful in the sense that I don't want to speak on behalf of the nations. Like, their governments on their own. They've got representatives here at the conference. They're having their own bilateral meetings. But you're right. I mean, there's been, it's probably the maybe the worst kept secret, but there's been a real incredible interest happening around Minto, and that we think that's extremely exciting, and it's actually complete leadership in this country. And so we're waiting to sort of see how that will work out. Yeah, I think, again, Tronjak-Witchin, what I've seen is that they've worked with previous companies around that coffee deposit. It was Goldcorp, and then of course it was acquired by others, and even the initial junior, and there's some things, continuing to play out there. We'll see, what happens with that asset. And then Ross River Denny Council, who have had a lot of work there. It's the same area that Scott's in, as well as Natchitoches Done, but that they're in a position right now where they've been moving on a project which is on the old brownfield site off Faro Mine. And so that's another one where there seems to be a structure where there's an ownership position. So, if we see in 2025 some of those play out, you're going to see, 1 to 2 to maybe 3, who knows, critical mineral projects where the nations are at the table with the private sector hand in hand. And that will surpass anything, I think, collectively that we're seeing in the country from that level of economic reconciliation.
Okay. No, thanks for that color, those insights. Back to you, Scott. In some respects, I think the Valley discovery you have has broken some conceptual locks. These deposits aren't supposed to be so high grade and so big and concentrated. Fort Knox was really the target, sub 1 gram. Maybe just provide a bit of color as to the attention you've received and feedback and perspective you've gained since the discovery in 2022 on how relatively speaking, you've broken some conceptual locks on these deposits. They're not supposed to be so high grade. Trucer-related gold deposits, basically granite-hosted intrusions.
Yeah, well, I think it takes a special type of ignorance to go chasing something like that when that's the conventional thinking. And so, in some ways we got pretty lucky, but all the evidence was there of good gold endowment over a big area. So it's nice to be able to overturn that thinking, but I also think it underscores the importance of sort of grassroots level prospecting, where you have people picking up rocks that aren't supposed to be picked up, and you have these entrepreneurs. It's basically it's the working out of your parents' garage, the Silicon Valley. On that side of things, prospectors are basically those entrepreneurs, and that's where those ideas come from. That's where the too dumb to try ideas get tried, and a lot of good things come out of that. So I think it's important to keep nurturing that ecosystem really on a global scale. Just being able to explore responsibly leads to a lot of good things down the road.
Mr. Premier, can we talk briefly on the permitting process before we wrap up? Just that mining industry has been very clear on the importance of a clear and predictable permitting path for all companies in various stages of growth. What measures are being taken by your government to streamline that process for environmental assessments and the whole process in general while maintaining the high environmental bar?
Yeah, I'll put, I guess, 3 different pieces. One would be, first, I think we have our environmental assessment process also has Canada at the table. So there's been a bunch of work done right now. Of course, as we watch what's happening in Ottawa, it gives us the challenge of understanding what's going to play out after this prorogue. But right now there's language that's being consulted on or just about to be consulted on to actually reduce the red tape within the environmental assessment process. So that is looking at existing projects and having the ability to sit down between the companies and the nation in that area and being able to waive that process if it's some additional activity. So I think that's pretty significant. It took a long time to get there, longer than I would have, any of us would have wanted to see, but it's gone back out for the last sort of review, and then it has to get attached to a federal government bill. So hopefully, whatever plays out in Ottawa, whether folks stick in where they are now or it switches up, that people have that opportunity, the government of the day, to take that and move it forward. It's really important for our industry in the Yukon. The second piece, I would say, we have a water board which plays a key role. Like if you want to build a mine, you go through environmental assessment, you need two other things. You need a quartz mine license, which the government of Yukon would work through, and they need a water license in most as well. So, continuing to bulk up what they have for capacity is incredibly important. It can be a difficult process to go through them all, but it's important to be able to focus on that and make sure they're doing the right work. And the last piece is, look, we've in the Yukon, there's been this stall to come up with the new legislation. You've got lots of folks in the room that know the industry really well, and now sitting with First Nations at the table, I think what I'm hearing as well from our government is, like, we've got to make the right changes now to give the certainty and to move this forward, because we've kind of over a long period of time been in this little bit of gray area of almost getting there to move on the legislation. So I think most people have seen this pivot to a modernization of legislation. I think BC's having some, big tough conversations right now, as well as other jurisdictions. We're trying to do jurisdictional scans to see where legislation is working and it's competitive, but also making sure that in the uniqueness of the Yukon with the relationship with our communities, that it's something that's going to, focus on protecting environment, because it's incredibly important to all of us, but at the same time make sure that there's an industry that can flourish.
Okay, no, appreciate that. Scott, in 30 seconds, what's got you excited for Snowline in 2025?
It's, a lot of different things, but just to be concise, moving ahead with Valley, getting the rest of our results and updated resource, moving ahead with exploration in the district. I think we're just scratching the surface out there, and there's a lot of potential to find something else a lot like Valley, so we're pretty excited to keep pushing out there. And of course, just advancing our conversations, advancing general understanding of the asset, both in the markets and in the Yukon, and hopefully building into the kind of foundational asset for the Yukon that we discussed.
Okay, fantastic. I'll let you close here, Mr. Premier. Blue sky for the Yukon mineral sector in 2025.
Yeah, I think, look, keep an eye on for us over the next couple of months as a jurisdiction, the great companies that are there. I think there's going to be some innovation in ownership on the critical mineral side. So, watch what happens with some of these projects as we go into the next 2 or 3 months. And look, just to end, I want to say, in my role, we're as Premier of the Yukon, we're incredibly proud of Scott, and he's getting an award this week. And it's the H.H. Buds Hustis Award for top of his field. And I just want to say that, we're, as Yukoners, this is the best of what Yukon is, having somebody that is incredibly intelligent, that has done many different things, been educated globally around the world. I'll let you look at his bio, but chose to come back because he cares about the Yukon and to create something that is going to help all Yukoners. So proud to be on the stage here with you today.
Very good. That's all the time we have. Please join me in thanking our panelists.